Okay guys, so in today's video we're going to be doing a reptile room tour for March 2019. Now it's been quite a while since I did my last reptile room tour. I think I did one for January. And a lot has gone on since then. We've got updates with Char the bearded dragon, updates with Red the corn snake over here. Quite a lot has actually gone on with Red, so I'm quite excited to talk about him because I haven't yet. And also we do have a new setup in the new reptile room, so I'll be talking about that as well. But before we get into looking at this reptile room, why don't we go inside the other one and start off there? Now I know that I did say the other reptile room, but that's kind of cheating. It's more just like 2 extra enclosures in the living room. But regardless, we're going to start off by looking at the tropical vivarium, because I do have some more updates for that. Now, just starting off by taking a look at the plants, you'll see that we have had an amazing amount of growth. Particularly this Neoregelia bromeliad that's growing underneath these skylight tinies from DMS Vivaria. It is blushing incredibly well, it's just so vibrant. And then going around the enclosure, you might notice that there's like bits of soil on the moss and all that. And that's because I have added something to try and help the plants grow, because some of the ones at the front particularly are having quite yellow leaves, and I'm sort of in the thinking that there's sort of not enough minerals in the substrate, so I have done something to try and combat that. So what I've actually done with this is I've added a product called Arcadia Bio Revitalizer, and what this is, as you'll see on the back of the packet, it's like a really high mineral and organic sort of fertilizer that's safe for use with reptiles and amphibians. And I've added pretty much the entire bag of this to this enclosure, except for a tiny little bit I had left that I stuck in Splat the Crested setup. But hopefully once the worms and that in this enclosure get mixing it in with the old substrate, hopefully the plants will start doing better, because the ABG mix I've made up has got like no minerals in it at all, and I do think that that was impacting the plants, but hopefully that issue will have been resolved. Now obviously I could go on for longer about this setup, but I am sort of conscious of the fact that it's just plants, and not everybody's into plants. I mean, I like plants, and I know some other people with Vivaria like them, but this is mainly a reptile channel, this is a reptile room tour, so let's stick to the reptiles. On that note, we're going to start having a look at Splat the Crested gecko. Now, taking a look at his setup, not too much has changed with it that I've sort of done. I have added a couple of Wandering Dew plant cuttings, and they are starting to take off, so hopefully that'll be another little splash of colour in there. And the bromeliads and stuff have started blushing, but like I said, not that much has happened apart from the plants are growing in properly, and I am sort of happy with this where this enclosure's at. It's very, very different from how it started off when I first set it up ages ago. I'll throw a card up now so you can check that out. But yeah, it is doing really well. Now, if we take a look at Splat himself, Splat is just doing perfectly fine. He's a sort of brown harlequin Crested gecko. I'm not exactly sure on the morph, not particularly interested, I'm not a morph man. As long as they look nice, I'm not bothered. But yeah, Splat's doing really well, he's eating whatever I throw at him. Apart from locusts really, still doesn't like locusts, you might remember that he doesn't like them. Don't know why, just personal preference. But that is Splat, and he's doing really well. So, having had a look in sort of the living room at the 2 setups in there, why don't we take a look around the main reptile room? Of course, this would not be a proper reptile room if we didn't spend a good amount of time looking at Char the bearded dragon, because Char is a legend. Now, quite a lot has gone on with Char since the last reptile room tour. I actually think in the last one that he was possibly still in brumation, or it might have been that time when I'd like woken him up for 2 weeks on the vet's orders, but I decided after that to send him back to sleep, and then he did wake up of his own accord in like February, or probably early February actually. It was sort of 3 weeks ago, and this is the 1st of March, so getting me dates mixed up and all that, but that's me. So as you'll see, he is looking really, really good. He's not that interested in food at the minute. It's been like 3 weeks since he's been up, and he's pretty much eaten nothing. But something really big did actually happen with him last night. So basically what happened last night is I gave Char something to drink and he drank it, and then the effect on him wanting to eat was absolutely instantaneous. Like, he had a drink and then he started eating instantly, even though it was time for him to go to bed in like 15 minutes, like 15 minutes before light off. And usually he won't do anything before that time because he's getting tired. But like, it's really hammered home just how important hydration is. Now, I don't want to go into exactly what I did and what was happening and what me sort of thinking is now, because it's actually that important, I think, that I want to make a whole video dedicated to it. Not just talking about bearded dragons, actually talking about the other reptiles I keep and hydrating them. So that'll probably be the next video I upload, but I did just want to make the point of, like, that really did surprise me what he did last night, and obviously I'll talk about it in the next video, so if you want to see it then do subscribe and you will see that in your inbox like next week or something. But yeah. Evidently though, Char this morning has decided that looking for Mrs. Char is still more important than eating, and he seems to be doing a lot more of that than touching any of the nice salad I made for him. But I promise you, last night he did actually eat his salad, which is something that in its own is a big shock. So that just sort of gives you the idea of sort of how amazed I was at just how having a drink really did affect him. But anyway, that is it for Char for now, so let's move on to Red. So where do we start with Red the corn snake? Well, I think that the best place to start is probably actually talking about his thermostat. You can see the probe for it right there, because it was the thermostat that was causing me all the issues with setting up Speckles the leopard gecko's new enclosure, and also having to put Red into brumation, even though I hadn't really planned to. So, if you remember back from last time, Red's new thermostat wasn't working properly, and the other one I had, like, I couldn't use it for him at that time. So, basically, I was forced to brumate him. I had to, like, it was safe to do, I had it planned, I cooled him down over either a week or a fortnight, I can't remember now. And he went into brumation just fine, and he's out of it now, and he's doing really, really well, so all of that side of things was fine. But I think you might remember that I said I was going to get his thermostat fixed in 10 days. That didn't happen, and so I ended up getting a refund for it, and now we have this thermostat. I'll take it off the wall for you to see a bit closer, but this is just like the unit for a microclimate Evo. Now, as you can see, this has got lots of technical stuff on it, so I'll probably make a review on this in a couple of months, but so far it is like the best thermostat I've ever had, and I am really impressed with it. So sort of the other one breaking and having to get a refund is sort of a blessing in disguise, if you like, because I've ended up with a better one. So I'm going to try and get Red to come out for you so that you can see him, and while I do, I'm going to talk a little bit about his setup and also about him. So if we just open the door, he is in the hide under here. If I just make a bit of noise, he'll probably come out. But while we're waiting for him, his enclosure is a 5 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot bioactive setup, just like Red Char's. He's coming out here, by the way. He always makes me smile. But yeah, so his and Char's are the same size, and Red is actually the oldest reptile in my collection. I did have another leopard gecko, but she did sadly pass away. I'll probably make a video about her in the future, actually, because sort of the development in how I've cared for my reptiles since getting her, her name was Cleo if you don't know, has changed tremendously. But yeah. So since coming out of brumation, Red has actually eaten. I gave him his very first day-old chick to eat, and he just hammered that straight down, so I was really pleased with that. But he's only eating once a fortnight at the minute, although he is doing really well, and honestly, I've never been able to complain about Red. Well, since he was a hatchling anyway, he was the most fussy feeder of, like, any corn snake I've ever heard of when he was little, but now he's just an absolute champ, and honestly I'm just really happy with him and really happy with how he's doing. And of course that leaves us with only one, Speckles the leopard gecko, who's in this new enclosure right behind me. So let's take a look. I did only do this setup last week and I made a full video on it, so if you want to find out more about it then do check that out. But some basic stats before we look at Speckles. This enclosure is 3 foot long by I think about 50 centimetres deep and about 50 centimetres tall, so it's like a good size for a leopard gecko in my opinion. Bioactive, cork bark and all natural decorations and stuff, and also the heating and lighting is something that I'm really happy with in this setup, although I did talk about it for a while in the last video, so if you want to find out more then do check that out. Now, as I mentioned, Speckles is really nervous in new environments, and as predicted, he has only stayed in this one very hide all week. And honestly, I wouldn't expect him to use a different one for a couple of months. Even though, like this piece of cork bark and this one here are from his old setup, he's not going to use them, even though he should recognise the scents on them, because he is just quite nervous of new environments. One thing that is showing really well right now, and I have noticed especially since putting him in this enclosure, is this partial basking thing he does, where he puts out a part of his body under the UV light, which is this Arcadia Shade Dweller lamp, so that he can sort of bask without exposing his entire body. Now, in the wild, this is sort of an adaptation to avoid predators, because these being pretty defenceless animals, what better adaptation could there be to getting all of the sunlight that they need for just sticking out a tail that they can, like, you know, if something grabs hold of it, they can shed the tail and run off and survive. So if they've evolved to bask like this, then they're just basically increasing the survival rate. That does beg the question now as to why he's doing it in this setup and he didn't used to. Well, he did do it, but like every time I come in and the lights are on, he is doing this when he's in this enclosure. The only thing I can think of is that perhaps it's got something to do with this not being blocked by a mesh now. So perhaps the ultraviolet index down here is a bit stronger and he's putting his tail out because like he's feeling the benefit of it, or maybe it's because the enclosure's taller that the UV index is actually lower, so he's spending longer in it to get the same benefit. I don't really know. Anyway guys, that does really sort of wrap up this reptile room tour. As you can tell, a lot has gone on since the last one, so I was quite ready to make this video now, and hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I have. Of course, the reptile room is always changing. I'm sure by next time, I'm really hoping that Charles is going to be eating properly by next time, and hopefully we will finally get the inhabitants of the tropical vivarium in the enclosure in the living room. But anyway, things are going really well and I'm sort of happy with where we're at the minute. So yeah, so I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.
Was